Welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. I'm Mary Crafts, and I know. I say this every single week. Do I have a guest for you? But today, I really do. And the reason that I chose Bill to be my guest is because we're now launching into the new year, and I want you to take hold of this new year. I don't believe in New Year's resolutions after all this time podcasting, you know that. But I do believe in New Year's intentions and what you're going to set for your intention for this year. And I don't know anyone better to help me with this today and to help you set your intentions than my dear friend, Bill Schuffenhauer. Welcome to the podcast, Bill.
My gosh, finally we are here. So exciting. And you know what? I absolutely love what you say, Mary. Not a huge fan of New Year's resolutions. If we get into it, I have comments on that too, because in my world, we talk about the near wind, which is a lot of things that people do for the New Year's. So I love the intention more, significantly more, and love to help people, as you say, craft a meaningful life. I say build a life by design.
There you go. It's the same. I just happen to use that because my last name is Crafts, and so it kind of works.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's start. I want to right off the bat establish your expertise and who you are and how you got to this point. I know you're a former Olympian and medalist at the Olympics. I know that you actually did bobsled here in Salt Lake City when we had the Olympics 2002, right? All
Correct.
right. So that puts you in a very elite group, but let's put you in even a more elite. You didn't grow up in a home that was all about sports and achievement and making sure that you were a gold medal winner. You didn't grow up that way. So let's set the stage for where Bill came from.
Yeah, absolutely. Fortunately, the way I look at my entire life story was just a blessing for me. A lot of learning lessons, but in most cases, people would look at that life on how it started and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that," or all the victim mentality words that come
Yeah.
along with it. And I chose at a young age to not be in that victim mentality. Now, yes, to highlight what you're referencing, I grew up with one of the most well-known street drug moms in all of Utah history. And all the police knew her, all the drug dealers knew her, all the courts knew her. She was very, very well known. But what did that also mean for me, right? That meant a life of street life, drugs, alcohol, gangs, abuse, you name it. I was exposed to everything under the sun, and
Yeah.
that's what I was born into, and including that, because my mom did leave that lifestyle, right? She was in and out of jail, in and out of prison, in and out of halfway houses, constantly on probation or parole. So I myself would bounce back and forth from being with my mom. She would get in trouble. I'd go off to a foster home, or I would go off to, every once in a while, my grandmother. And that eventually led to 17 different foster homes as a youth.
Wow.
So because that's what I was exposed to on a 24/7, it was always, forecasted by family members and friends that knew that. They're like, this little kid is going to grow up in the same space and be another statistic, just like what his mom is. He's probably not going to make it to the age of 16. He'll be either jailed, dead, or in prison, one of the three. And, it bothered me as a young kid, even though I didn't really know what life was about, but I knew that there had to be something better, and not having to wonder where my next meal's going to come out. Where am I going to sleep? Where, am I going to have clothes to go to school and hang out with the other kids? And I fortunately just, was able to start doing some digging when I moved from Salt Lake to Roy, Utah.
Ooh,
And
there's a big move.
it was a big move at the time. I mean, I was honestly the only kid of color up in Roy at the time.
Yeah, it's a
And
big cultural move. Not everyone who's listening may understand the difference between downtown Salt Lake City and Roy, Utah.
boy, Utah, I'll tell you what.
That's right. You got your rednecks living high and mighty up there.
Yeah. So When I moved to Roy, and it was because my mom had gotten in trouble again, and I was going to go to my 18th foster home, but the state then gave my grandma the opportunity. Hey, we know you take care of your daughter's daughter. Would you like to take in your daughter's son? Here's the situation. And thankfully for my grandma was willing to take me in, and I moved, an hour north to Roy, Utah, and I clearly remember the first day of walking into school. I had raggedy pants on, an old, dirty, ripped up, rock shirt, and a big giant afro, and I stuck out like a sore thumb in this school.
Yeah.
And I felt it right away. And I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to fit in? Fortunately though, the kids were really nice. Something we don't see a lot of these days with school
Mm.
bullying and such. And it was my first opportunity to just, we talked earlier before we even started live, right? Is to be curious about this different environment, right? And trying to figure out as a seventh grade kid, how do you fit in this new environment? It's already difficult as it is to go to a different school and try and find new
Yep.
friends and all that stuff. But there were no kids at that school that I was like, wow, that's like my friends here in Salt Lake City, which totally
Right.
opposite. My friends in Salt Lake City were all, their parents were troublemakers. They were involved with gangs. They were involved with drugs and alcohol and in trouble with the law. And so I literally followed this one kid around who's in my documentary called Against All Odds, Jake Schultz. And he was an athlete. Everybody liked him. And the more I followed him around without him knowing, the more I was like, I really like how kids interact with him. I really like how they look up to him and this energy that he has. And then one day I followed him after school, and the kids were out there and they're handing things off and they're jumping over stuff. And I was like, I don't know what they're doing, but I'm really good at running from cops and jumping fences. And I think this can apply to whatever these kids are doing. And lo and behold, they were out there practicing track and field. And long story short, I was just like, well, maybe this is my opportunity to attach myself to this sport. And then that's going to help me eventually change my stars so I don't become another statistic like my other family members, like my mom and my dad and my stepdad. And my first year, I failed miserably. I mouthed off to the track coach, mouthed off to the baseball coach, got kicked off of both teams. That summer, went and hung out with some old school friends and broke into Bing and Schwinn and got busted for that and went to juvenile detention and had to go to court and do after school like hours and all this stuff. And it was like, well, wait a minute, that's not what we were trying to do here. And at that point in time, I knew that my grandma didn't have the tools and resources to really help me elevate to that next level. But what I did know is that my teachers and coaches would potentially help me. And they mentioned it several times before. So I reached out to them to say, hey, this is who I am. I'm this kid, seventh grade kid who moved from Salt Lake City, now eighth grade. And I don't want to follow the same footsteps as my mom and end up in trouble with the law. And I want to be someone that like all the other kids like, and they're involved and I'm involved with them. And, how do I create this new architecture, if you will? And thankfully the teachers and the coaches were like, hey, we believe in you. And they were willing to stay like after school, help me, extra homework. They were willing to do whatever it took to help me really understand what does it look like to go from this kid with nothing to just a normal kid in society. And, a lot of success principles like taking accountability, team dynamics, all those things are things that I had an opportunity to learn early on. I didn't know exactly what they meant back then. I just knew it was going to get me. It was a stepping stone for me to get away from that lifestyle and try and pursue how do I become this Jake Schultz kid that everyone liked. And
Okay. So I have
yeah,
a question. I want to stop right here
okay.
because in a different life, I was a juvenile parole officer. Yeah, that's a long time ago.
Yes.
But there, if with the kids that I worked with, and juvenile parole means that you've been in lockup as not just probation, lockup, and then helping them come from lockup back into society. And in the time I worked in that field, I have to say and this has always been a sad piece for me, I didn't have one success.
Right.
But what you're describing, Bill, is something different. And that's the piece I want to talk about. So many of these kids are willing to put in their time or willing to go through a program, but never believe here or here that they really have the ability to change and that this is going to be their life. I sensed that there was some light inside of you that you somehow knew that this was possible for you. What did that look like? How is that possible where you came from, and like how did you recognize it?
I think the biggest benefit was partially that move into a different environment. Now, I hear a lot of people that are adults in these situations that say, oh, I just need to move somewhere else. And the reality is, right, they'll take whatever chaos that they are creating in that space with them. But for me as a kid, we talk about in TMIC, the creative mind is the child that survived. And I was so curious that I've already lived this lifestyle. I've seen the worst of the worst that my mom provided me. And then I saw my mom my grandmother try and fill in the best that she could as a single mom, taking care of her daughter's kids. And I just realized when I moved, I was like, oh my gosh, there is something else. There is a possibility the grass might be greener on the other side in this situation. And that's where I just got curious, because I realized even as a youth, as a seventh grade kid, I started having these thoughts of what does it look like for me in the future? And one day I knew that one day I was going to have to grow up. One day I was going to become an adult. One day I was going to have a family of my own. Hey, did I really want that to continue the trend of the lifestyle my mom provided me to now become an adult doing the exact same thing? Or did I want to try and figure out how do I stop the chaos right now? And a lot of people are like, well, how did you even come up with that? Now, to be honest, like for me, it had to be divine intervention at some point in time is what I would say. Like
That's the point that I'm getting at.
I'm extremely spiritual now. I don't force it on anybody else, but at the end of the day, as we were talking even before, ancient alien theorists, how did they do some of that stuff? There had to be some sort of divine intervention for me to think of like, hey, instead of going out and causing more trouble or playing with your friends or doing this, let's start thinking about what does your future look like, right? And I extremely fortunate that I did have those thoughts, and I did have people around me that I could rely on to, because when a kid or an adult is in that situation, they only can see the darkness that they're currently in. And it's such a vicious cycle. And thankfully that move from, the ghettos of Salt Lake City to Roy, Utah helped me kind of go like, wait, where are we going? And I find that I was like, whoa, this is different. This is a different world. Happy kids, no cops, no drugs, none of that stuff. And I was like, well, how did they get here? Right.
Yeah.
And it was just, I started attaching myself to like, why not me? Why could I not have the same lifestyle as that kid over there and that kid over there? And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of mistakes along the way, because I was a brand new, theories and processes and ideas for this young kid that I was. But I was like, well, I've always had this like mindset that if that person can do it, then I can do it. And,
Right.
and so I just put that to a challenge.
And that's the key, that not everyone believes that. If they can do it, I can do it.
Right.
Most people believe, well, they can do it, but I can't do it. And I try and teach that to women now who are entering their 40s, 50s, even 60s, that if I can do this, you can do this. And so it doesn't really matter what point in life that you grab onto that, but it is a key issue, a key point, this belief in yourself. And you did that at such a young age. So how did you get into bobsledding from track and field?
It goes back to even that conversation we just talked about. I truly feel that we live in an omnipotent world. Anything is possible, right? Anything that we want to create in our life is possible. Obviously, we've got to have the right people around us, the right education, the right experiences, the right mindset. But, you know, when I eventually got to that point of being a world-class athlete, and that majority of that was through track and field. And in 2000, I was one of the top ranked decathletes in track and field in the entire world, and was favored to make the Olympics in Sydney and win the Olympic medal. And 2 weeks before the Olympic trials, I went down to BYU just to do a warm up meet, and had a pretty significant injury that literally just shut the door on my Olympic dreams. And I went home. I felt sorry for myself, victim mentality, and the universe, God, whatever people want to identify with. It's pretty amazing how it could work if we truly pay attention to the small things in life. Somebody came up to me, 3 months later after this disaster and said, "Hey, you should try out for the Olympics in Salt Lake City." And I was like, "What? Like,
What?
what are you talking about?" Because I had only been so focused on the Summer Olympics and pro football stuff that I was like, I had no idea that we had the Olympics coming to Salt Lake City. I had no idea that there was anything like Winter Olympics. And the only thing I knew about winter is skiing and hockey, figure skating. And so, the question is like, what are you really talking about? And there's like, well, there's this sport called bobsled, and track and field and football guys like you that are fast and powerful are really good at bobsled. And I was like, well, okay, I guess I'm interested, but the reality is the Olympics is literally a year and 3 months away. And for an athlete to transition into a whole nother sport, never being in that
Yeah.
sport,
Yeah.
very, very, very slim. So, of course, I was introduced to bobsled via the movie Cool Runnings,
One of my faves. Okay.
right? So I had the opportunity to watch, Jamaican bobsled team do their thing, and that sparked a little bit more interest. But it wasn't until I had the opportunity to watch a video of Team USA competing in St. Moritz, Switzerland, and I saw the true physicality, strength, power, explosion, and speed it really took to push this heavy, you know, object down with three other guys and jump in and go down. And I was like, well, that looks a little interesting. And I think I can apply, what I was doing in track over to here. And had some of the coaches come up when I was living up in Ogden at the time and training at Weber State, and they came up and watched one of my workouts, and they said, "We want to invite you up to Park City to come and try things out." And at the end of the day, we sat and met with my family and my coaches that I was working with in track and field. And did we have a massive failure? Absolutely. We had a massive failure not making the Olympic team in 2000, but we just gathered and we said, what would that look like if we really did make this big move and switched over to a sport we've never even heard of or never even been a part of? Why not? Right? We just took that mindset. Why not me? Why? Who's to say, like, the universe is delivering this opportunity to us? Obviously, there's a reason why. What if we took the same energy, um, mindset, focus, physical ability, and just took it out of this track and field bucket and dropped it into this new bobsled bucket? Why not? We've got a year and 3 months. Let's just go for it. How cool would that be if we could write this story? The kid who grew up on the streets of Salt Lake City turns his life around to make the Olympics in Salt Lake City. And we just went, that would be really cool. And I clearly remember that conversation thinking, man, what if we could really make this work out? And this is
Yeah.
just me alone in my own house. I'm thinking, man, that would be such an amazing story. And I was like, I'm just going to go for it. My team supports me. I'm still in shape. I still feel like I have something to offer the sports world. More importantly, I still have something to offer the world in general as this kid who overcame complete adversity, came from nothing to potentially achieve everything. And so we did. I had all the support from my coaches, support from the family, and we just went for it. And a year and
Yeah.
3 months later, made the Olympic team and won the first Olympic medal for Team USA right here on our home soil in 46 years.
Wow. Okay, so let me just stop and point out again. It's the same principle that you grabbed a hold of in high school that you now grabbed a hold of them. You asked the question, well, why not me? And what would happen if I just tried, and did this? Well, the issue becomes with so many people is they ask that question, well, why not me? And what they answer back, unfortunately, is, well, because I might fail. And that fear keeps them from grabbing a hold of what might be. I just have to say again, Bill, there was a piece inside of you that innately lived, and you were given opportunity after opportunity, and you stepped in. You didn't just lean in and look around like what's going on in there. I mean, you stepped in and jumped in with both feet. Instead of asking, well, why not me? Oh, I might fail. You said, well, why not me? Damn, let's go for it.
Yeah, that's
That
it.
takes an innate amount of courage, Bill.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, Mary, I had nothing to lose, right? The expectations of what I was supposed to accomplish, if you ask society, was very, very little. And I think that's where a lot of people tend to get like derailed. Is like, well, what is that person going to think? What is that person going to think? I was like, I don't care what anybody thinks. Like, my goal when I decided to pursue this new lifestyle and change my stars was just that. I just wanted to change my stars. I want to change my path. It was no one else's, so I didn't care what anyone else thought. And I was like, how cool would that be if I could create this story that I overcame some of the worst adversity to make it to the Olympics in my own hometown? Like, that would be so cool. And at the end of the day, I could look back and hopefully be an inspiration to so many other people, which, as you know, you and I both have. And it's, I mean, to the degree where I've had clients that I've sat down with and I've asked them, like, what's keeping you back from accomplishing XYZ? I had a client last year tell me, I've been wanting to do this project for 55 years and fear's what's held me back. And I'm like,
Yeah.
fear is like the number one tool for you to move forward and create success. Like, hands down. I mean, just last week I was at the Olympic bobsled park and there was a gal from India learning how to drive bobsleds for the first time, and she crashed in a curve. It's a
Ugh.
difficult curve, but she came back up and she was deflated as all could be. And I said, listen, I didn't go to one bobsled tryout and make 3 Olympics and win an Olympic silver medal and 2 world championships and 5 national championships. I said, failure is what got me to this point. And the difference is you have to look at failure as a learning tool and not something that's holding you back. So as opposed to saying, oh man, I crash, I suck. It's like, oh gosh, I crashed. It does suck, but what can I now learn from this experience so I can then get better and move forward?
It's that greatest of all quotes is I never fail. I either succeed or I learn. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you've
So
got that in spades, Bill. All right, so now you've accomplished all of this major Olympic stuff. You've reached all these goals. But as with many athletes, when that career ends, there is that deep question of what's next? And is my life kind of over? My husband, who was a sports guy from the word go, and played for the Phillies when he was young. He was, all that kind of thing. And still, when I married John, and when he was 71, he's still playing tennis 3 days a week, and he's playing softball, and he's, golfing. He's doing all these things. But now, at nearly 75, he's like, who am I if I'm not this? And so I know every athlete who has excelled in sports reaches that point of, well, then, if I'm not this, then who am I? And it inspires them to something else, or they go off the cliff.
yeah, 100%.
So what happened to you?
Yeah. And this is, probably, I would say, you know, one of the most probably inspirational parts of my whole story, because that is exactly what happened to me. I retired, from competing as an Olympic athlete. But mind you, prior to that, while I was on tour, you know, being being involved with sports, I was gone 10 months out of the year on average. And then on top of that, when I wasn't gone for sport, I was doing charity events, speaking events. And so, I was gone all the time, which didn't lead to a very healthy relationship lifestyle back home with family and stuff like that. So when I retired, before I retired, I kept telling myself, I just want to be a normal person. I don't want to travel anymore. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. The self-talk mostly revolved around just being a normal person. The problem with that is I didn't know what a normal person lifestyle looked like. I didn't know what that architecture of their lives looked like. So I retired, was just thankful to be done and spend more time with family. But because I didn't know, and I manifested that, I didn't know what that lifestyle really meant or what it looked like. And so I was trying to recreate the wheel of this new life. So I took all the success principles that I learned growing up, all the success principles and education through school, what have you, coaches, Olympics, and I literally threw it out the window. And I was like, now I'm ready for this new life. Well, that was probably both the worst decision I made as well as one of the best decisions I made, because I ended up doing what a lot of athletes call the loss of identity, right? I was used to traveling the world and winning medals. And then when I didn't have that, I was like, well, what do I do now? What do I do? And because of that loss of identity, as well as not being able to ask for help, became probably the worst 8.5 years I've ever experienced in my life. I went from being an Olympic champion and this athlete that everyone knew, traveling the world, White House visits, the kid who overcame adversity to win an Olympic medal in his own hometown, only a block away from where he was sleeping out of garbage cans and all that stuff. And I hit my retirement, and then I was, now what? And so I was trying to reinvent myself with no tools, because I threw all my success principle tools out and my learning lessons and education, and started living from more of that victim mentality. Well, this is why this opportunity is not happening. Well, it's that person's fault. Why is these opportunities not showing up? I've already done this. It should be handed to me. And that took me down to 8.5 years, from 2010 to 2018. Severe victim mentality, no accountability, alcoholic, addict, in trouble with the law, isolation from family and friends. And I literally went completely right back to where I started from. And 2016, and hopefully I don't freak anybody out in here, but I'm very, very transparent in my life.
Yeah.
I was, director of development at Ballet West, which you and I know Ballet West very well, but I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable. And in 2016, made a choice to take my own life. And fortunately, again, obviously I'm still here, overcame that. And it took probably another 2 years until 2018. And then I got connected to TMIC, and I was like, man, what am I doing? I just went through 8.5 years of chaos that I created after learning all these success principles as a athlete, as a human being, as a coach, as a mentor. I threw all that out the window, and all I had to do is just continue to like I did with track to bobsled. I just had to take those success principles from sports into the real world and rediscover myself. And I clearly recall one of my mentors and partners at TMIC. He asked me, he's like, let me ask you, Billy, do you lead a life by default or by design? And he started naming off, if you lead it by default, these things are not going well. Your relationships suck, your job sucks, your business sucks, what have you. And I was marking every one of those. And I was like, 100x, 100x. I was so miserable in, getting in trouble with the law and everything you could think of. And he's like, well, but if you lead a life by default, it's not too late to take accountability for what you created. That's the key. You have to take 100% accountability for that. Another lesson that was really difficult for me to learn is, how do I take accountability for the things that I think is everyone else's fault?
Yeah.
But when I did, and it was me kind of looking from the outside in, I realized that who I was as a person was not conducive to healthy relationships across the board. And I was like, man, if there's an opportunity to recreate my life by design, and I have this one last chance, and mind you, when this conversation showed up in 2018, I was planning out my next suicide because I was still so miserable.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, if this is the opportunity that you're trying to make blatant in front of my face, I'm gonna attach myself to this and really just go for it. And I will commit more to you. I will commit more to being of service as a human being. And where I discovered my number one pillar of focus is to be of service to others, and really just start taking baby steps on this new world that is now making more sense to me. And reflecting back on that 8.5 years, which I would wish on nobody. I don't even care if they were my worst enemies, even though I don't have any
Yeah.
of those anymore. It was so dark and so zero hope. So that's
Mm.
where I was for 8.5 years. Absolutely no hope. Thankfully I came across Chad and had that conversation at the same time. I got connected to the world famous Jack Canfield from All the Chicken of the Soup for Your Soul books, and
Yeah, yeah. What a great guy. He's been
he
on
and
this podcast.
oh, has he?
Yeah.
Jackson. Um, I was able to get a scholarship from his training course on train the trainer and success principles, and I just started, not being so hard on myself and saying, okay, yes, you've had a very interesting roller coaster of a career, but this is the Olympics of life now for you. So we've got to get that curious. We've got to start surrounding ourselves with the right people. We've got to get rid of every excuse that we continue to create on why we're not being successful, and start, in a way, start over, right? But attach yourselves to these positive things. And since 2018, I constantly, even though I'm a partner in TMIC, I still practice our principles day in and day out. We do a meditation Monday through Friday that I've still done since the day we've done it. I still practice Jack Canfield stuff. I still constantly go get, certifications and degrees from schools because it's that curiosity, right? It's just because I learned one thing doesn't mean that's the end. So I keep going and going just to kind of stay ahead of that curve. But that darkness was really, really dark, extremely dark. And I'm fortunate that I did go through it because I'm here today and have the opportunity to, just show other people out there that are experiencing that darkness, whether it's, extremely bad or they're just kind of getting a touch of it, to show them that by taking that accountability, we can, again, as we mentioned earlier, create a life by design. And, taking that accountability for the life that you currently have is very, very important, and not blaming other people or other situations on why your life is the way it is, because the only person that can change our life is us.
Well, I don't know if you know it, but you just in that last 5 minutes landed on the crux, the very issue that I want people to take from this podcast as we look into the new year. That as we set an intentional life, the very first thing that we have to take a look at is that victimhood. And so many times when I have said to people, you are 100% accountable for what's happening in your life, they give me that look of like, no, no. I mean, what about my parents? And then what about this? And what about what happened at this? And blah, blah. And they start listing all these things. And I say, no, you are 100% accountable for what's happening in your life. And when people finally get that, rather than being afraid of it, because, Bill, the good news about being 100% accountable for everything in your life is if you don't like what's happening, guess what?
You can change
it. Yeah. And so what the thing that people are most afraid of taking accountability, is actually the thing that sets them free to choose something different. And that's exactly what you did. You took accountability and you chose something different. Now, you have mentioned this acronym enough times in the show. I'm sure my listeners are like, Whoa, what is TMIC and what's that? So let's share that first.
Yeah, TMIC is just a group of us that really deep dive into the ontology of humanity, right? Is that because as you know, Mary, we and you mentioned it already, as human beings, we tend to create a lot of excuses for our lack of success and for our failures and justify all those things. At the foundation of who we are, we're creators, period. Right? We consume information around us so that we can then turn around and create something beautiful and magnificent and lift humanity up altogether. And so TMIC, stands for the most important conversation. So what is the most important conversation that we're not having as individuals to ourselves? What is the most important conversation we're not having with our family, our friends, our organizations? Right? And when we unpack that, what is the most important conversation? And in this case, kind of just touch upon what we're talking about, we're not having the conversation of accountability. So we continue to create these vicious cycles and these excuses, and we don't take accountability. And as soon as we have that conversation with ourselves, Billy, am I being 100% accountable for everything in my life? And you truly sit there and take that time out, and it might be a short time out, it might be over a week, to really unpack, am I truly taking accountability for my life?
Right.
Is life happening to me, or is life happening for me?
For me.
Right. And those are different
Different
mindset
mindsets. Yep.
conversations that we need to have for ourselves, or else we do find ourselves 50 years down the road wanting to do something that we wanted to do 50 years ago and be like, well, I didn't do it because of this. Right. So,
Yep. I recently had that conversation with myself. I was in the middle of a situation that I was not enjoying, and I felt like was really putting a big roadblock in my life of really loving my life. And I was like, what is this? And finally I said, wait a minute. What's that phrase I always tell people? And I was able to actually stop and say, all right, Mary, you've been living that this is happening to you.
right.
But how is this happening for you? And it created an opportunity for me to actually examine and say, well, I'm learning this, and this gives me an opportunity to do this. And if this hadn't happened, I might just be here twiddling my thumbs and thinking, wow, life is so great, I guess I'm done. But I was actually able to take that piece of advice and move through it. And once I accepted it as it was for me, by golly, if 2 days ago it didn't begin to resolve itself, which I had nothing to do with, but it opened up the pathway with the universe to make that happen because I first stepped in to accountability and taking it in as a position of gratitude rather than, dang, why is this happening to me?
Right.
It's a true principle, Bill.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's really interesting, even this conversation. I think you and I could sit here and chat for hours, Mary, but things that come up for me is like, again, one thing that Jack taught me is that E plus R equals O. You have an event plus your reaction or your response, we can then dictate the outcome or not dictate the outcome. Because the more we live reactive through life, the less opportunity we have to dictate where we want to go. But when we can come from that mindset of being responsive, meaning we take that time out and say, okay, is this happening to me or is it happening for me? And we download that and be like, this is actually happening for me. So what are the next steps I need to take to then dictate the best outcome possibly for me or my organization or my team, right?
Yeah. Bill, I want to ask you a question. I posted on social media about a week ago, and I got all sorts of different answers. I wanted to know your take. So, in talking about gratitude, does healing happen before the healing, or does gratitude happen before the healing, or does the healing happen before the gratitude?
Oh man, that could go. I mean, that could go both ways. I think in reality, I think my response to that would be, as soon as you decide to have gratitude, the second you think about having gratitude is when the healing will start.
Yeah. They're
Right.
hand in hand.
Right.
They have to move forward together. If you wait to be healed before you're grateful,
Not going to
it's
happen.
not happening. But if you say, well, if I'm just grateful, then I'll be healed, that's not happening either.
Nope. Has to
But
have
you
intention.
became grateful for your opportunities as you moved to Roy. You became grateful for your opportunities to step into the Olympics and and heal that mindset. Now after the Olympics and you went through your high and then a tremendous low, together you began to be grateful for your situation, and that began to heal it so that you could be more grateful to heal it. And I think that this is such a key piece, Bill. People think, well, when I'm fixed and I'm healed and I'm like flying high, then I'll have something to be grateful for. But it's that very thing we've just been talking about. Is it happening to me or for me? If it's happening for you, which you and I both can guarantee that to somebody,
Yeah.
then the gratitude begins to flow.
Yeah. And yeah, I love what you're just saying too, because the self-talk that I've created over time to address the maybe not so positive things that happen to us in life is as soon as it happens, my mindset doesn't go to like, oh, why me? Why is this happening to me? My mindset goes to, oh, wow, this situation just happened. I don't like it, right? It's not the funnest part, but what can I learn from it? What am I supposed to learn from this situation? As opposed to like, oh man, this sucks. What am I going to do? Poor me, blah, blah, blah. Right. I don't have any more of that conversation, but we also, one of the things I want to highlight, Mary, as you know, is that these mindsets and this self-talk and these thoughts and these principles are daily practices.
Yes.
We can't just read one book on success principles and expect to go out and change our entire life in the world, right? You have to take those success principles and implement them in your architecture, remove the negative things out of your architecture, people, places, and things, remove those things and start replacing them with better things that we practice on a daily basis. And when we can do
Right.
that, life is just different. It's really interesting. I don't know if have you ever watched Interview with a Vampire?
No.
Oh, anyways,
Okay. Add that
yeah,
to my list for the holidays. Okay, got it.
it's just, Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise are vampires, and because they see different, they're just different people, right? And this is maybe a bad analogy, but hopefully people out there that have seen a show, they just see life differently. And the more I practice these success principles and taking accountability and creating life by design, I just see the world in a different way. There's no more victim mentality. There's no more like, oh, I don't know if I could do that. It's always like, yes, I can do that. That's going to be hard, but I'm willing to go through it because I think I have the tools and resources. And if I don't, I've actually got a great community over here I could rely on, right? And it's more that continuous positive self-talk, and that's what I really want people to understand out there is you got to get away from that negative self-talk. Because even
Yeah.
if you're not the very best, doesn't mean you still can't be the very best if you do some of the things that we're talking about.
Amen. Let it be so.
Right.
Bill, as we wrap up today, I want you to share with my listeners as they're approaching the new year. What is the one piece of wisdom? I don't call it advice. I call it one piece of wisdom from Bill Schuffenhauer that you would like them to ponder on as they approach their intentions for this year.
Yeah. Normally I'd give you one of my quotes, but I'm going to kind of frame it like this. What would your life look like if you were to come at it with more intention? If you were willing to step into that uncomfortable zone of transformation, what could your life look like a year down the road, 5 years down the road, 20 years down the road? What could it look like if you do some of these things that we talk about and you implement them into your life? Is that impacting you just today or for generations to come? Get curious.
I love that. Get curious about you, your life, where you're going, about others, their lives, where they're going. And then I always say, find friends that are about the same thing, that are going the same direction, that aren't just good with the status quo. And when you have a community of those people, you'll succeed. Bill, thank you for being on the show today. At the end of the podcast, we have Bill's links to his website, to how to find him, all things about Bill, because I know you're going to want to stay connected with this guy and probably hire him for your next speaker to be at your company, because he's freaking amazing, because he could talk on anything. I mean, you may or may not have noticed while he was talking, but he works out. And he's got a whole bunch of things he can inspire people on. Bill, thank you for being here today. I'm so grateful for you and your inspiration in my own personal life. And what I'm going to do differently as I approach this new year with intention to be my very best self. And I know I'm doing that when I also want it for everyone else.
Yeah. And I want to say, Mary, thank you to you, because at some point in my life, as we mentioned earlier, you were an inspiration for me back then in the world of business. And I continue to hope that I can represent, our great state of Utah and Salt Lake City as somebody who just did it the right way and took accountability to create a life by design. So thank you for being a part of that.
Bill, in February, I'm going to receive a great honor in this state as Entrepreneur of the Year, and whoever thought that I would receive that at this age, but I'm sending you a personal invitation. I want you there.
I would love and be honored to be there for that. Absolutely.
All right, I'll look forward to the next big hug then in February. And until we meet again, my dear, dear listeners and friends, remember, life is not just going to happen to you. You have to be actively involved and make choices to craft your meaningful life. Namaste.
Crafting a Meaningful Life.